Welcome to Radiant Spirits Rising with your host, Heather Lena. Heather explores how natural healing can support your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. She guides you on how to harness your inner power to overcome challenges, improve overall health, and strengthen your connection to your true self. Through grounding techniques, holistic remedies, and the transformative practice of energy balance, Heather offers practical insights to help you create harmony in mind, body, and spirit. So now, please welcome the host of Radiant Spirits Rising, Heather Lena.
Hey, everybody, it's Heather Lena. How are you guys today? I don't know what the weather is like where you are, but I am in northern Arizona and it is cold. Winslow hit 0 this morning and my pipes in my house felt it. First time ever. So, you live and learn. So I'm so happy to have you guys with me today. So last week we talked about how your body could be likened to a computer. And your soul was like the cloud, and how your DNA picks up on things and codes yourself. And so we're going to start moving forward this week in looking at things in a different perspective. So just like last week, where we looked at how your body was a computer, which is a whole different perspective than what a lot of people look at, this week we're going to start looking at inside ourselves. So we're starting with self-worth. So if I can get the first introduction slide, please. So today, go back a couple slides. So today we're going to be rooted in strength, why dandelions inspire true self-worth. Now I'm going to be honest, self-worth is something that I struggle with, and I have for years. Going through school, I was bullied. I didn't fit into the norm. And so my self-worth has always been a struggle for me. And so you might be asking yourself, how can a dandelion inspire true self-worth? So I'm going to ask you to look outside the box. I'm going to ask you to think outside the box today, even more so than we did last week. And we're going to move forward, and I'm going to explain to you how a dandelion inspires self-worth. Next slide. Let me go with mine. Okay, so self-worth. So how does it relate to self-worth? You may be going, that doesn't make any sense. It's a weed, right? Well, over the last 90 days, I have been receiving messages about dandelions. It was the center of attention with my messages. And I think I've told you guys, if not, I'm going to tell you now. I struggle sometimes listening to messages that are being given to me. So many times, my spirit guides, my guardian angels, those around me have to send me multiple messages in order for me to figure out that they're talking to me, number one, and number two, what the message is that they are trying to tell me. And I have some really hard months in November, December, and January. And so, and these, usually my self-worth takes a little bit of hit during these time frames as well. And so after getting these messages from the dandelions, I actually started researching dandelions heavier, figuring out what they're about, what they symbolize. And now I actually look and think, you know what? I get it. I totally get the message. So I'm going to pass this message on to you. And I want you to really look at this and really look down deep inside and say, hey, can I relate to this? Does something, work with me? Does it resonate with me? And let's move forward and start working on a better you and a better self-worth for you. Next slide. So the origin of the message. So in childhood, I loved dandelions. I loved to pick them out of the ground. I loved to pull them apart. I loved to go outside if they were fully bloomed and blow them. I absolutely loved them. I loved them better than other flowers. My next favorite would have been roses. And that was only because my grandmother had roses and she had planted me a rose bush at my house. So I had roses every year, but really dandelions pulled to me. Anytime I saw a dandelion, I wanted to go over and I wanted to pluck it. And I wanted to pick it up and I wanted to hold it. And I would make bouquets of these. So I had a natural attraction to these dandelions. But what would happen? My dad would come out or my mom would come out, they'd see me with these dandelions and they'd tell me, throw those away. Or they'd say, don't blow that, you're going to spread it everywhere. Or don't pull that out, you're going to spread it everywhere and cause it to seed. Why? Because we had a lawn and I was picking these out of the lawn, and the standard was you did not have dandelions or weeds in your lawn. So I got used to not picking them. I got used to not blowing them. Why? Because I was being told, and my DNA was being changed to believe that it was bad, that it was a weed, and that I needed to leave them alone, which actually is not true. But this is how a belief system forms, and I didn't want to get in trouble, right? So every time they caught me with one, I would get chastised for that and get in trouble for that. I didn't want to be in trouble. I always tried to not be in trouble, because remember I said I was always trying to make sure that people didn't see me, that I was not somebody that they looked at. I didn't want to be in trouble. I just wanted to move forward. So fast forward to October 2024. It is still unseasonably warm in Winslow, and I am outside in my backyard working in my garden area. And I turn, and there is a fully bloomed, very large dandelion in my yard. And my first instinct was to go over and pluck that sucker and blow it. But I stopped. And what stopped me? What stopped me was, no, that is bad. Dandelions are bad. It's not good for you to blow that. So what ended up happening was I had a bunch of other quote unquote weeds in my yard, and I ended up having somebody come and cut it down. Broke my heart. But again, I was trained, I'm going to use the word trained, that they were bad, that blowing them was bad, that spreading their seeds was bad. But that dandelion just stuck out to me. And at that point, I really should have said, okay, why is this dandelion like glowing? Why is this dandelion sticking out at me? But I didn't. I just cut it down and kept moving forward. Next slide. So in November, I was invited back in June to go to a Park West VIP event. Now, Park West is a gallery. I've attended, when you do a cruise, let me say, when you do a cruise, cruises will have art auctions, and they are done by Park West Gallery. And when I had gone to Alaska in May, we attended multiple art auctions. Well, when we got back, so about June or July, I got an invite, fully paid event, to a VIP event by Park West Gallery. And I thought, yeah, this is too good to be true. But so I emailed them. I'm like, what do I have to pay? How much is it? And they were like, nope, it's totally free. You just have to buy your, if you have incidentals, everything else is paid for. So I asked a friend who had been on the cruise with me to go with me. So in November, we go to this event. And a part of this event is meeting artists. So we met 4 different artists, and we were able to buy their art. And Christian Masso, who is on Ink Masters, he's on Tattoo Rescue, he has just gotten the contract with Disney Pixar. He was the very last artist that we saw. And he had in the collection that they were selling of these paintings a dandelion, similar to what you see in the picture here. And this picture, the painting that I was looking at, it was huge. It was massive. And I didn't even realize how massive it was until I got mine in and thought, oh, I'm glad I didn't buy the great big one, because I would not have had a wall that would have even been allowed to put that on. But I looked at that dandelion, and that dandelion just kept calling me. Well, when they went around the room and started having him explain the artwork, he got to the dandelion. He talked about how, and it was like he was talking to me. He was talking about how the world believes that dandelions are bad and that you shouldn't blow them. But really what they're doing is they are just spreading themselves, and they're growing, and they're allowing themselves to grow. And, you can blow on them and make a wish, and how great dandelions were. And I was like, oh, I really like that painting, but I really just can't afford it. So I just let it go. So we're sitting there during the art auction, and I tell my friend, I'm like, I really want a dandelion, but I wasn't willing to buy the big one in the back. And all of a sudden, they bring out a mystery painting, And they're like, okay, who wants to bid on this mystery painting? And you have to bid on it at first before you see it, and then you can determine if you're really going to buy it or not. So I put up my number, got in, and they uncovered this dandelion. And I was just like, oh my God. Oh, yes, this is mine. So I bought one. Now, what's interesting about this painting is Christian Masso, for every one of us that bought one of these paintings, he had to paint it. This is not a print. This is actually an actual painting. So mine is actually varies from the one that originally was shown, but it's just beautiful and it just fits for me. But then I started thinking, okay, so there's the second time a dandelion has come up in the last 30-ish days, right? So I started thinking, okay, I need to pay attention because obviously there's something going on. Next slide. So in December, I am walking around Tractor Supply, looking at everything. And I walk over to their book section. Let me tell you, if you're looking for interesting books, go to Tractor Supply. They have the most amazing section of interesting books. And I happened onto this book called Dandelion Medicine. And there was only one that I saw. And I thought, really? This is what's standing out to me is a dandelion book. And I thought, okay, you know what? Obviously, obviously I'm missing a message here. Obviously, I need to start paying more attention to dandelions. So I bought the book, took it home, and I really just skimmed it. I haven't actually really read it yet. But it was amazing to me the number of things that you can do with a dandelion. Now, most people are like, why would you even think about a dandelion? But again, I had been attracted to them since I was a child. So as I'm working through this, I'm going to say to you, think about how you receive messages. Do you look at something and think it's a coincidence? Do you think, well, that's kind of interesting? Anytime you say that is interesting or that's weird, you really need to sit down and break it down further. Find out if there is a message for you in what is happening, because I guarantee you there are messages being shown to everyone. We're just missing them, or we're just not paying attention to them, or we just don't want to see them. So when I get this book home, I scan this book and it just gets my wheels rolling in my head. I'm thinking, why? What is the significance of a dandelion? What is the message in this, right? And so in case you guys don't know too, along with this, last year I decided I was going to run for mayor of my town, and I lost, but I really didn't lose by that many votes considering it's the first time I'd ever run. And so that took a hit to my self-worth as well. And so I was on the struggle bus with this, and it started about right after, now that I'm hearing this, it started right after the election ended is when this really all started hitting for me. So this was them giving me a message about my self-worth and kind of what I needed to do. Next slide. So if I look at these and you see roses, you see sunflowers, and you see dandelions. So when you look at this, what do you see, right? You see roses, which are very, very popular. You see sunflowers, which are, very, very popular. And then you see dandelions. So how many of you would look at this, not knowing what I'm talking about now, and go, why is she showing us a picture of a weed? Right? Why does she have a weed, quote unquote, next to these beautiful sunflowers and these beautiful roses? Well, it's because dandelions are beautiful, but they're just beautiful in their own way. They have been given such a stigma of being a weed that we tend to just look at them and go, yeah, we don't want to be involved in that. But we do want them. We do want sunflowers and we do want roses. So how is your perception? Is your perception that dandelion is a flower or is it a weed? My perception is a dandelion is a flower. It's beautiful. But so many times we are given the perception that we are to look at things a certain way. We're not allowed to look at a weed as a flower because it's a weed, but they really are flowers. They are plants, just like everything else. So look at this. Look at your perspective. How do you see that? Can you actually move your perspective to look at this dandelion as a flower instead of a weed? Can you look at it in the same perspective as roses and sunflowers? I can, because I've always loved them and I've worked through this, and I'm going to show you the similarities here in a minute. But really think about that. Think about that. And then start thinking about, can you view yourself as a weed, or do you want to view yourself only as a sunflower or a rose or something that is acceptable to others? Do you really just want to be acceptable to others? Or are you willing to stand out and just be your own person, just like a dandelion stands out? And it really makes you think when you really stop and think. And that was the message that I started getting when I really started looking at this, was look at how they relate, but yet they're different. And it will bring you information about self-worth, self-esteem, and all of that. So when I come back, we're going to continue our discussion about this, and we're going to show similarities between the three. So we'll be back shortly.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back to Radiant Spirits Rising with Heather Lena. Today we're talking about how dandelions can work with your self-worth and how they are rooted in that and how they can inspire your self-worth. So we originally talked about how this message came about in the first section. So now we're going to continue on. And so let me start over. So I started looking at similarities. So what are the similarities between roses, sunflowers, and dandelions? So all of them are flowering plants. They all produce a flower. Now, some of them are bigger flowers. The dandelions are smaller flowers. Some flowers are bigger flowers than even roses, but they all produce a flower. They all pollinate. So they all rely on pollinators, such as bees and butterflies. They all produce seeds that allow them to propagate their species. So, growing up, I knew sunflowers had seeds and I ate them, but it never really clicked in my brain until I was older that those seeds you could actually plant and grow, right? Well, it's the same thing with the dandelion. If the dandelion has totally bloomed, those are all seeds that just blow off and then they land and they start to grow. And literally they start growing as long as there's dirt anywhere that they land. Adaptability. They show resilience and adaptability, which again is like they just start blooming wherever those seeds land. Next slide. Growth and renewal. So there's symbolic similarities. Growth and renewal. So then I started looking at the symbolicness of a dandelion. So what is the symbolism of a dandelion? What is the spiritual symbolism of a dandelion? Because when I start getting messages like this, that's where I normally start reviewing is what is this? First thing I look at, spiritual. What is the spiritual symbol of whatever it is I'm being sent? So I started looking at that. So they all have the symbol of growth and renewal. They are associated with new beginnings and growth. They all have the ability to thrive and flourish. So ask yourself, are you allowed to have new beginnings? Yes. Are you allowed to have growth? Yes. Do you have the ability to thrive and flourish? Yes. So if any of your answers to that would be no, book your appointment with me. Those are belief systems that we need to work on, right? They are beauty and simplicity. They all symbolize beauty and the simplicity of nature. So even a dandelion in its smallest form in the yellow flower symbolizes beauty. It has a connection to the positivity. So they all hold positive symbolic meanings in different cultures. So even though in the United States, a dandelion may be considered a weed, in other cultures, they view the dandelion as a symbol, as a reference, as whatever it is, which makes it special and important, but only in certain cultures. So think about this. Do you want you to fit into every culture, or do you want you to fit into the culture that fits with you? And that literally just came into me. So came into my head. So I'm going to say that, right? So do you want to try to fit into every culture? Because if you're trying to fit into everything and get everybody to like you, your self-worth doesn't work like that. Your self-worth is based on you, your comfort, how you are, and people that support you. Not everybody is here to support you. And so how do you hold on to your self-worth being positive away from what may be the expectation that somebody else has for you? And we'll dig more into that in a minute. Next slide. They also have ecological roles. So they all have support for ecosystems. They provide food or habitat for insects and animals. And soil health. Now, this one was really interesting to me. So contribute to soil stability and fertility. Let me make sure I can read that right. Soil stability and fertility. But dandelions especially do this because they aerate the soil with their roots. So literally, the collective is saying that this is a weed, but it is something that actually is beneficial to the earth, to the soil. I found that totally intriguing, right? So something that everybody is saying is bad actually has a benefit that these other two flowers don't have. And that is to aerate the soil with the roots of them. And that to me, I was like, man, that's like really deep. Because how many times do we like not allow ourselves to be seen as our true selves because we don't fit in? But really what we would be doing is aerating others with our roots. So keep that in mind. Next slide. They all have human uses. So they all have an aesthetic value. They are admired for their beauty. And honestly, not everybody likes the same flower, right? My mom was not a rose person, was not a rose person. I'm not necessarily a flower person. Somebody sends me flowers, that's great. But you know what? I don't necessarily go out and buy myself flowers to cheer myself up because I'm just not a big flower person. They all have medicinal or practical uses. Dandelions have medicinal purposes and properties. And that book that I showed you earlier, it actually has recipes in there for different medicinal things that you can make with it, like teas, in order to help better sleep, in order to help with blood pressure, all of this. And I never had any idea that a dandelion could actually do that. It has cultural significance. Each is ingrained in human culture and traditions, like I talked about a little earlier. And they symbolize various emotions and events. So you wouldn't necessarily have dandelions in a wedding, right? But if you were having a garden party, you could put them in there, or you could even use them in there as part of the tea. Next slide. Some of the differences. So they all have different flowers. They all have different leaves. They all have different stems, different lifespan, different height, and a different preferred environment. And this again is where it comes in, where a dandelion will grow wherever its seed stops as long as it's dirt. So if it plants itself in between a crack in the sidewalk, it's going to grow. A rose and a sunflower, they can't do that. So that's actually a difference that I found interesting, because dandelions grow in areas that other recognized plants cannot grow. And so for me, I was like, wow, that really spoke to me and my self-worth, right? Which is I am moving and I am growing and I am shifting in my healing work and my healing business. And it's sometimes it's hard because people look at me strange, but really what I am doing is I am planting myself in a different space and growing. So where can you plant, or where do you need to plant yourself, or send a seed out to plant yourself, to help your self-worth and to help you grow and move forward? And so I was like, yeah, this is actually kind of a really interesting message for this week. So some of the uses, next slide, please, for dandelions. This was interesting to me. The entire plant is edible. So a sunflower, the entire plant is not edible. A rose, the entire rose is not edible. So, but this plant, the one that we call a weed, the one that nobody likes, the one that everybody says we need to get rid of, we need to cut down, we get fined by our government if we have them growing in our yard, is completely edible. And it has medicinal uses. It also has detoxifying properties. So this plant that everybody says is bad is actually the most beneficial of the three that we're even talking about here. And so how does that relate to your self-worth? So are people saying that you're bad because you don't do this, or you're doing this, but in actuality, what you're doing is what you're supposed to be doing, what your divine timing is. And so do you look at yourself like through their eyes, or do you look at yourself through your eyes saying it doesn't matter what they think? It doesn't matter what they tell me, because this is me. This is who I am. And therefore, I'm okay with it. I'm okay to be different. I'm okay to be unique, and really feel that it's okay. If you can't, then there's blocks there, or there's belief systems, or there's trauma there, right? Trauma for me was getting in trouble. If I got in trouble, it was just horrible for me. So what happened? I just got to the point where I wouldn't touch them because I didn't want to be in trouble. I didn't want that trauma. But that has caused me now to look at him and go, yeah, I'm not even going to touch that, even though both my parents are dead. So it wouldn't matter. And they don't care if I do it now, right? They don't care. But the trauma and the self-worth issue is still there because I just didn't want to get in trouble. So uses, roses. Petals are used for teas, perfumes, skincare, but the stems are not used for anything. Rose hips are very high in vitamin C, which is good information to have. Sunflowers are a source of food and oil. But again, their stems, their leaves, they don't have any uses. They're beautiful, and I love sunflowers, and I love sunflower seeds. But really, when you look at the three of these, which one makes the most sense to have around? A dandelion. And which one is it, the one we're always told to get rid of? A dandelion. Next slide. Dandelions, and this is where it really comes in. So commercial value. Dandelions have minimal value and are considered a weed. Roses, of course, they have a very high value in the floral industry. They come in, they help with decorations, they help with perfumes, and they help with gifts. Sunflowers are commercially valuable only because of ornamental, seeds, and oil. So even though dandelions have the most benefit from the three of them, it is that it has minimal value and is considered a weed. So when you look at yourself, do you consider yourself having minimal value? And do you consider yourself being more like a weed and wanting to be a rose or a sunflower? When in actuality, what I'm portraying here is maybe we need to shift our view and look at it from a different perspective. So when we come back from the break, we're going to continue this discussion, and I look forward to talking to you in just a few minutes.
Dr. RC will share extraordinary resources and services that promote educational success, as well as making a difference in the lives of all social workers, as well as the lives of children, adolescents, and teens of today. She will have open discussions addressing many of the issues that we face about our youth and how being employed in the uniquely skilled profession of social work for over 18 years has taught invaluable lessons through her personal experiences. She will also provide real-life facts, examples, and personal stories that will confirm that why serving as a child advocate is extremely beneficial when addressing the needs of the whole child. Listen live to Dare to Soar, Saturdays, 10 a.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network, and tune in radio as Dr. RC will provide thought-provoking information that will empower, encourage, and strengthen students, families, and communities across our nation. You can also visit her at soarwithkatie.com. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back to Radiant Spirits Rising with Heather Lena. Today we're talking about how dandelions can inspire your self-worth. So in the first part of this podcast, we talked a little bit about how the message came about. We talked about the similarities and some differences between roses, dandelions, and sunflowers. And now we're headed into the spiritual meaning of this plant. So if you're watching me, welcome to the 6 people that I currently have on or listening. If you're listening to me and I don't see you, welcome. Don't forget, you can give me a call or send me a message. Ask me a question as we're going through this. I'd love to answer your questions. So spiritual meaning of a dandelion. So once I saw these 3 dandelions in different aspects, the first thing I did was I went in and I researched the spiritual message of a dandelion. And even though it's not on this slide, the first word that popped up was transition. And that is the word that stuck out with me, was transition, because I have been being told by my team, my spirit team, for a while that I needed to do some transition work. I needed to transition my view about things, and I wasn't listening. So what did they do? They sent me a message in the form of a dandelion, something that they knew, my dad knew, would catch my attention. So when we're going through this, think about transition. Transition was my message. So if it's your message too, if we have time, I'll go through that a little bit more. But what I've got on this screen here and the other screens is something that I feel like the message needed to be for most of the other people for the day. So the spiritual meaning, wishes and manifestation. So dandelions, just like Christian Masso talked about, dandelions represent making a wish, right? You make a wish and you blow on the dandelion and you send that wish out into the world to let it grow and develop. That's what they do, right? what do we do when we manifest? We say something that we want, and then we need to let it go into the universe and let it happen. So dandelions are actually a good way to do that. You could pick one up and make your wish, make your manifestation, and then blow it in the wind and literally just release it and let it manifest the way it needs to. Resilience and adaptability. They grow in any environment. It doesn't matter whether it's on a dirt lot, whether it is between sidewalk cracks. If they could get into a building, they would do that too. They can grow in various environments. And that's what we need to do. We need to be able to grow in various environments and be okay with growing and being happy with growing and allowing our self-worth to say, hey, this is who I am. You don't like it, that's okay. But I'm not going to stop what I'm doing or how I'm feeling about myself to take on what you believe that I need to do. It represents ability to overcome challenges. So dandelions, because they're classified as a weed, they literally are cut down. They literally are burned. They literally have all of these challenges that are thrown at them, and yet they still manage to grow and thrive wherever they can. So they thrive in difficult circumstances. So how do you thrive in difficult circumstances? How does your self-worth stand up in difficult circumstances? Do you tend to hold your ground and say, yes, that we are moving forward? Or do you tend to back off and fit in? That's the question. Next slide. They represent new beginnings and growth. So the seed dispersal signifies potential for new life and fresh starts. It encourages change and moving forward. And that was a message for me as well, was to change and move forward. And that was something that I was struggling with. I am actually working on that. And actually doing this today is actually helping me work through that. Connection to sun and light. The yellow flower associates with positivity, joy, and optimism. And when I was a kid, I got so much joy out of picking that up and just pulling it apart and letting it go, right? Letting those wishes go. And so now when I look at it, I'm going to really work on being, you know what? I'm okay. And picking it up and tearing it apart, or picking it up and blowing it away. Healing and well-being. It represents potential for inner healing and rejuvenation. Think about that. Represents potential for inner healing and rejuvenation. Do you need inner healing? I need inner healing. Come see me. We'll do your inner healing. But it's also a healing herb. Like I said, it's the whole plant can be used. The whole plant is edible and it's got medicinal purposes. Next slide. So how do you shift your perspective? A dandelion is considered a weed, wait for it, because they grow in places where people don't want them to grow. So they have all these similarities with plants, other plants, but because they grow where people don't want them to grow, they are considered a weed. Because I was like, this makes no sense. I actually typed in, who determined that a dandelion is a weed? And this is what popped up. And I thought, how many times does our self-worth take a hit because we are growing and developing in a different way and other people don't want us to do that? And they attempt to bring us down and not allow us to grow. And that literally just hit me like a freight train. I was like, holy crap. A dandelion is considered a weed because they can spread quickly and reproduce in many conditions. So if people are attacking your self-worth, is it because they don't want you to bring other people into the same thought process that you are in? Or they don't like the fact of where you're going and they're trying to get you to stop spreading and growing? So look at that. If your self-worth is not where it needs to be, ask yourself, why is it not there? Make a list of things that attack your self-worth, that you don't feel worthy in. And then look at that and say, okay, where does this belief come from? Where does it come from? Does it come from being told over and over again that I was wrong? Does it come from being bullied? Where does that belief come from? And then look at this and say, you know what? I need to shift my perspective and not worry about what other people think of me. I need to not worry about where I'm growing, how I'm growing. Just know that I'm growing and doing what I need to do for me and build up my self-worth and not worry about these other people, right? Do you see how this is shifting towards this whole gearing into the self-worth in Dandelion? Because I sure did. As I was going through this, I was like, holy crap, this makes so much sense. Next slide. Working on your self-worth. Do you see yourself as a weed, or do you work at being seen as a rose or even a sunflower? Right? Does your self-worth based on what others' expectations are of you? So do you, if someone looks at you weird or makes a snide comment to you, do you internalize that and take that as you're a bad person? Because you're not a bad person. That person has their own opinion, and that's okay, but you're not required to take that in. You're not required to internalize other people's feelings or emotions about you. Do you try to change who you are to be accepted and fit in? Because if you're doing that, then what you're doing is you are not being true to yourself, and your self-worth is taking a hit. So your self-worth is going to take a hit if you are desperately trying to fit in with others that you don't fit in with. If you're constantly trying to work as a rose and be what everybody wants to see, and everybody wants to be all beautiful and pretty, instead of deciding, you know what? I'm not this. I'm a weed. And literally that's what I'm going to start telling people is I'm a weed, because really that's my philosophy in life now after doing all this research is I'm unique. I'm special. I want to grow. I want to develop, and I want to do it my way, how I do it. And therefore, if that doesn't allow me to fit in with you and what you're thinking, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And I would challenge you to look at yourself really deeply and say, okay, you know what? What are we doing here? What am I doing here? And start shifting that perspective. Next slide. So what is my definition of self-worth? My definition of self-worth is it is an unwavering recognition of your inherent value, independent of external validation or societal expectations. So what does that mean? That means you are you, and it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It is viewing yourself through your own eyes, free of the influence of others' judgments or the pressures of the collective. So think about that for a minute. It is viewing yourself through your own eyes. How many times do we stop and say, you know what? I'm not going to view myself through my best friend's eyes or my mother's eyes or my dad's eyes. I'm going to literally view myself as me internally. What do I need? What do I want? What do I need? What do I want? And from there, it actually frees you up a little bit, because when you're looking at yourself through your own eyes, you don't care what other people think. You don't care how other people feel about you. You don't care what other people say about you. Why? Because you are creating that self-love and that self-worth internally into you. So makes sense. Let's sit there and think about this for a minute. It's the unwavering recognition of your inherent value. How do you perceive your value? Do you perceive yourself as trying to be a rose? Or do you perceive yourself as a weed that doesn't care? Think about it. Next slide. Your self-worth is not defined by achievements, appearances, or comparisons. How strong is that? Your self-worth is not defined by achievements, appearances, or comparisons. That is really, really something we need to look at. If you compare yourself to others to get your self-worth, we need to work on that. You need to work on that to build up your self-worth. If you feel like you always have to put on a certain appearance, then that's a self-worth issue that needs to be worked on. When we come back, we're going to discuss this slide a little bit more. Don't forget, you can send me a comment, or you can send me a phone call. Send me a phone call. I'll see you guys back here in a minute.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back to Radiant Spirits Rising with Heather Lena. We have been talking today about how a dandelion can inspire your self-worth. So we are continuing on with the last slide we were on about my continued definition of self-worth. So your self-worth is rooted in your unique essence, right? Who are you? What makes you unique? These type of things are what help build your self-worth, because you are being who you truly are in order to be who you are. And I know that probably didn't make any sense, but really, how many times do we like put up a facade or change how we're feeling in order to fit in order to be accepted? Your unique essence is enough. If someone doesn't accept you with that, then they aren't your people. Honoring your individuality, same thing. Be your individual. We are collective, but each one of us brings different gifts, different values, different experiences to the people around us, and we all need that. Embracing your flaws. Now, this is difficult for some people. Embracing your flaws, because what is the perception of most? That we need to be perfect. Everything has to be done correctly. There is no room for error. But there is no such thing as a positive way to do things and make it to where it's perfect. There's the word I was looking for. Perfect. There is no such thing as perfect. So if you're trying to meet a perfect standard, there is no perfect standard, because everything ebbs and flows and everything changes. So if you are holding yourself to a standard that is you are unable to meet because it is one of perfection, yeah, then we need to work on that. That perfection for me is a big one that we've had to work on with me and my healer, because I really, really, really always had the belief that everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be right on line. And it has taken me a lot of work to get to the point where I realize flaws are okay. Imperfection is okay, because there is no such thing as perfect. Celebrating your strengths. What are your strengths? Do you celebrate those? Do you show those off? Or do people make comments about your strengths and so then you tend to hide them inside? If you're hiding your strengths inside, you're not being worthy to yourself, and it affects your self-worth. So think about that. Make sure that you understand what your self-worth is actually defined and not defined by. Remember, your existence alone is meaningful and enough. So you just being you is enough. You just being you is very meaningful. Very meaningful. Don't try to be something that you're not. Don't allow your self-esteem to be attacked or your self-worth to be attacked because you don't fit into the norm. Because you're not going to fit into the norm. None of us fit into this norm because we're all different. Even though we're taught from a young age that we all have to fit into this same box, right? Really, in effect, that's wrong. What we need to be doing is not fitting in this box, but spreading out, letting ourselves be our true selves. Because when we do that, what happens is others see us doing that and we become somebody they can look at. There's somebody that they can respect, somebody that they say, you know what? Hey, they're doing that and they're okay with doing that. I need to be okay with that too. And really in my world, I was grateful for people like Teresa Caputo, Amy Allen. When I started doing my research on my abilities, having those people get on national TV and say, I am a medium, I can hear spirits, I can see spirits, this is their message. It was so beneficial for me and my self-worth to know that it was okay for me to be like that as well. And this is what happens when you start being your true self and your self-worth starts being built up and you show your real self, other people will see that and be like, you know what? I'm impressed with that. I want to be able to do that as well. I would challenge you to not be afraid to be a dandelion. Be out of the norm. Look at things from a different perspective. Blow your seeds and grow where they need to grow. And don't be afraid to do that. And allow yourself to grow differently than others. Allow yourself to be your own unique self. Next slide. So as we work through the self-worth process, these are belief systems and things that are held onto us that have to be released energetically. So reminder, my sessions can be done online or in person. Sessions are booked at a half an hour or an hour, and I offer a free 30-minute consultation. You know what? Book your consultation. Come talk to me. Let's sit down on a Zoom meeting and see what we can do. I don't think you're crazy. I'm not going to judge you. This is a judge-free zone. All I'm going to tell you is it's time to start working on yourself. Reminder about my membership program. It is $25 in January. You get 2 personal card pulls a month, a weekly crystal card pull that's done for the entire group because it is part of a Facebook group as well as a Patreon group. You get a weekly message card, you get exclusive discounts and priority access to me. Next slide. Our affirmation of the week. So this fits right along with our discussion about becoming a weed, and that is, today I choose to accept that I can do anything. So do you believe that you can do anything? If you don't, then come see me. Let's work on that. Because believing that you can do anything is part of being a dandelion and your self-worth. Your self-worth should allow you to know that you can do anything you want to do. It just is what it is. Next slide. So thank you for joining me on the show today. Send your questions or comments for the podcast to heatherlena01@gmail.com. For all other inquiries for booking services and purchasing merchandise, go to heatherlena.com, or you can email me at contact@heatherlena.com. I would love to sit down with you and talk about how we can help you shift your perspective and move forward. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Healing with Heather. So in my past 3 podcasts, I had talked about it was Healings with Heather, but I've gotten them all on the same page, and you just do at Healing with Heather on any of those, and it'll pull me right up. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you for joining me for my podcast today. We will see you next Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Arizona time. And I challenge you this week to look at yourself as a weed. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.
This has been Radiant Spirits Rising with your host, Heather Lena. Tune in each week as we step into the world of natural healing and discover the radiant spirit within you. Tuesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios. Start your journey toward balance and renewal.